It was a quiet Saturday morning in Lexington, South Carolina, the kind that starts with birdsong, the soft hum of sprinklers, and sunlight spilling through oak branches onto tidy driveways. The air was still, heavy with the smell of cut grass and dew. Inside a single-story brick home at the end of Oak Ridge Court, Derrick Miles stood by his kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching the neighborhood come alive. Lawn mowers started in the distance. A child's laughter carried on the breeze. It was a morning like any other, ordinary, peaceful. At least, that's how it seemed. He rinsed his cup, grabbed a trash bag from under the counter, and headed toward the front door. He was thinking about chores, not conflict, about the small things that make a weekend feel normal after a long week at work. Derrick had spent years in federal service. Quiet, disciplined, trained to see danger where others saw calm. But even with that instinct, he didn't expect what waited outside. The door creaked open. The morning air hit his face. Cool, sharp, clean. And that's when he saw them. 3 figures stood at the edge of his driveway. 2 men in black tactical-style vests, and between them, Tamara Gilbert, the HOA president. The vests had patches stitched across the chest. Community enforcement. It looked official at first glance, too official. But Derrick's eyes caught the details others might miss. The patches were off-center, the boots scuffed, the gear mismatched. Nothing about them screamed professional. It screamed performance. He froze for half a second, trash bag in hand, sizing them up. Tamara's chin lifted, her tone already commanding. "Mr. Miles, we need to talk." Her voice was crisp, clipped, meant to sound in control. But Derrick heard something else beneath it. Nerves. He set the bag down, wiped his palms on his shorts, and stepped forward just enough to close the distance. "About what?" he asked, tone calm, unreadable. One of the men stepped forward, tall, pale, shaved head, mirrored sunglasses hiding his eyes. His voice was flat, mechanical. "Community enforcement," he said. "You're in violation of neighborhood regulations. We're here to detain you until police arrive." The words hung in the air like smoke. Derrick blinked slowly, almost amused. "Detain me," he repeated. "For what? Taking out my trash?" Tamara folded her arms tightly across her chest. Her voice rose a little louder, projecting to anyone who might be watching from nearby porches. "You've ignored repeated notices. This has gone too far. We can't have someone undermining community rules. These men are here to make sure you comply." Her phrasing stuck with him. "Make sure you comply." The second man, shorter, stockier, beard trimmed unevenly, pulled a folded paper from his vest and read off a list as if it meant something. Property violations, non-compliance with HOA orders, unauthorized driveway modifications, loud gatherings. Derrick's lips twitched with disbelief. "So that gives you the right to walk onto my property and detain me?" The tall man's jaw tightened. "That's right. You can come peacefully or we'll make it harder." And there it was, that edge of intimidation Tamara probably thought would work. But Derrick didn't flinch. He'd faced men who meant every threat they spoke. These two were just pretending. He tilted his head slightly, studying them. The tall one's left boot heel was worn unevenly. He wasn't law enforcement. He was probably a construction worker playing dress-up. The beard's hands trembled just enough to betray nerves. And Tamara was pale, her throat bobbing as she swallowed hard. Derrick finally said, "You're not police. You have no authority here. And right now you're trespassing." Tamara's cheeks flushed. "Don't talk to me about authority. Derrick, we've had real complaints. I'm not about to let this neighborhood fall apart because of you." Her words cracked slightly near the end. Derrick didn't raise his voice. He just said, "You picked the wrong driveway today." The tall man stepped closer, boots scraping against concrete. "Sir, don't make this difficult. You're being non-compliant. We have the right to escalate." Derrick's mouth curved into something close to a smirk. "Escalate? You're standing on my property with no badge, no warrant, no training, and no clue how much trouble you're in. You got 30 seconds to back off before this becomes something you can't walk away from." Tamara's composure broke for a moment. "You think threats make this better?" The HOA exists to keep our neighborhood respectable. People like you. She stopped herself, biting her tongue too late. Derrick's voice hardened. People like me, huh? Finish that sentence if you're brave enough. Silence. Only the faint hum of a lawn mower down the street. The shorter man looked uneasy. Look, this doesn't need to get ugly. Just come with us. We'll wait for the officers. Clear it up, maybe they go easy. Derrick tilted his head. Funny, the only officers I see here are the ones pretending to be. The tall one shifted his stance. Tamara, desperate to recover control, barked, "These men are authorized by the HOA board to enforce compliance. We don't have to answer to you." Derrick chuckled, low and cold. Authorized? By who, your printer? A ripple of laughter came from somewhere down the block. Curtains twitched. Phones appeared. He turned his head just enough for his voice to carry. Hey, if you're watching this, drop in the comments where you're from. I want the world to see how wild this HOA has become. Then, back to Tamara, quieter, steady. This isn't law. This is theater. The shorter man whispered something to his partner. The tall one ignored him. He took another step forward, and from across the street, a teenage voice cut through the tension. Yo, Mr. Miles, I'm streaming this. Thousands watching. It was Tyler Griggs, a kid from a few houses down. Phone held high. The tall man turned sharply toward him. Put that down. He started forward. Derrick moved before anyone blinked. One fluid motion. He stepped between the man and the teenager. His tone dropped to a quiet threat. Touch that, kid, and you'll regret it for the rest of your life. The imposter froze mid-stride. Tamara shouted, "This is a neighborhood matter." From a nearby porch, a woman holding a baby yelled back, "Looks like harassment to me." More voices joined. "Where'd you even find these guys?" "You can't arrest your neighbor." "This is crazy." Derrick stood tall, shoulders squared, voice calm. "Tamara, listen, this is an order. It's chaos, and you created it." Her jaw trembled. "You're twisting this. We just want our rules followed." "Rules?" Derrick said quietly. "You confuse control with order. They're not the same." The murmurs grew louder. Even the shorter imposter looked ready to walk. "We should go," he whispered. "No," the tall one hissed. "We finished this." He reached into his vest and pulled out a pair of cheap metal cuffs. "You're under neighborhood arrest." The crowd gasped. Phones zoomed in. Derrick didn't move. His voice dropped into that calm, lethal tone reserved for people who didn't realize the danger they were in. "If you even try putting those on me, you'll be arrested for impersonating an officer and unlawful restraint. That's a felony." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the tall man lunged. What happened next was over in seconds. Derrick stepped forward, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted, pivoted, and turned the force back on him. The man gasped, stumbled, and suddenly the cuffs clicked, locked around his own wrists. The crowd erupted. "He flipped it on him," someone yelled. "That's what you get," shouted another. Derrick stood over him, calm as stone. "You're done. Don't resist." Tamara's face turned ghost white. "You can't arrest him," she screamed. "You're right," Derrick said softly, pulling a leather wallet from his back pocket. He flipped it open. A badge gleamed in the sun. Gasps rippled through the street. "Because I already did," he finished. The sound of sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Before we head deep into story, tell me in the comments. Speech balloon, where you watching from? And if you're hooked already, tap that subscribe, because what happens next will shock you. The sound of sirens grew louder, breaking through the stunned silence of Oak Ridge Court. Every neighbor had spilled out by now, lining the sidewalks. Phones raised like a wall of glowing judgment. The smell of fresh asphalt and morning dew mixed with the sharp tang of adrenaline in the air. The tall man, the one now cuffed, was still struggling against a metal biting his wrists. His partner stood frozen, half in disbelief, half in fear of what was coming next. Derrick didn't move. His stance was steady, eyes calm. He had faced war zones quieter than this. Tamara Gilbert, red-faced and trembling, was still shouting, "You can't do this. This is private property. You're intimidating board representatives." "Board representatives?" Derrick said flatly, glancing at the men. "You hired impersonators to act as law enforcement. That's a crime, Tamara. You just don't realize how deep you are." The shorter man finally found his voice. We didn't mean any harm, sir. She said it was just to scare you a little, keep the peace." Derrick looked at him, and for a moment his expression softened. "You want to keep the peace? Then start by telling the truth." He turned toward the gathering crowd, raising his voice just enough to carry. "Every single one of you, record this. Keep your cameras on, because this is what happens when power gets abused in your own neighborhood." A murmur of agreement swept through the group. Someone called out, "We got you, Derrick." Another shouted, "That woman's been out of control for months." Tamara's voice cracked. "You don't understand. He's been violating HOA standards for years. Illegal driveway, unapproved gatherings." "Barbecues?" Derrick interrupted. "That's what this is about? You harass your neighbors because they had friends over." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The first police car rounded the corner, lights flashing, siren cutting abruptly as it parked at the curb. Two uniformed officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts. The crowd hushed. The lead officer, Sergeant Blake, a local cop Derrick knew vaguely from community meetings, approached slowly, eyes moving between Derrick, Tamara, and the two fake enforcers. "All right," Blake said carefully. "What's going on here?" Derrick lifted his badge into view. "Federal Agent Derrick Miles. Off-duty homeowner. I was approached on my property by 3 individuals claiming to be community enforcement. Attempted to detain me without authority." The officer's eyebrows shot up. "Community enforcement?" Blake turned toward Tamara. "Ma'am, is that true?" Tamara crossed her arms tight, trying to hold herself together. "We were just trying to maintain neighborhood order. The HOA board authorized." "The HOA can't authorize armed enforcement," Blake interrupted. His tone was calm but carried weight. "Who are these men?" The shorter one raised both hands. "We were just hired by her. She said she runs a community and needed extra security presence." Blake nodded slowly, jaw tightening. "Ma'am, do you understand impersonating law enforcement is a serious offense?" Tamara's confidence faltered completely now. "They're not officers. They're volunteers. Wearing tactical vests and detaining people isn't volunteer work." Derrick said evenly, "It's unlawful detention." The tall man, still cuffed, lowered his head. "We didn't know he was, you know." Derrick cut him off quietly. "Didn't matter who I was. It was still wrong." The police moved quickly. Within minutes, both imposters were being guided to the back of the cruiser. The cuffs clicked, the doors shut, and the crowd exhaled like it had been holding its breath for minutes. Tamara's face drained of all color as she realized this wasn't going away quietly. Later that afternoon, Oak Ridge Court was the calmest it had been in months. But the calm wasn't peace. It was tension holding its breath. Derrick sat on his porch, a glass of water beside him, phone buzzing nonstop with notifications. Videos of the confrontation had gone viral overnight. HOA tries to arrest the wrong man was trending across social platforms. His inbox flooded with messages from neighbors, reporters, even strangers across the country. He scrolled through one comment that made him chuckle. "Bro, just Uno reversed the whole HOA." Another said, "This is what happens when you mess with the wrong guy. Respect." He looked up, hearing footsteps. A familiar voice said, "You handling the fame, all right?" It was Sergeant Blake, walking up the driveway, hat in hand. Derrick stood to greet him. "Trying. Never thought I'd go viral for taking out the trash." Blake laughed. "Could have fooled me. The department's been fielding calls from news crews all morning." He grew more serious. "We charged the 2 men with impersonating officers and attempted unlawful detention. They'll probably cut a deal, but it's going on record." "And Tamara?" Derrick asked. Blake sighed. "Lawyers are involved. HOA scrambling. She's trying to claim she didn't know they'd act that way." Derrick shook his head slowly. "Of course she didn't. They never do, right up until someone gets hurt. The officer hesitated, then said, "Off the record, most of the neighbors are behind you now. Half the board's calling for her resignation." "Half isn't enough," Derrick said quietly. "You can't rebuild trust halfway." Blake nodded. "You thinking about staying involved?" "Not sure yet," Derrick said. "But I'm not backing down. People like her count on fear to keep everyone quiet." The officer smiled slightly. "Well, you sure didn't stay quiet." They shook hands. Blake left, his cruiser rolling down the street. Derrick watched him go, then leaned back in his chair, staring at the oak tree that shaded his yard, the same tree his daughter used to climb before she left for college. This home wasn't just property, it was history, roots, memories, and no board, no paper tyrant was going to take that from him. That evening, Tamara sat alone in her HOA office, a converted dining room filled with binders and rules. Her hands shook as she scrolled through her email. Hundreds of messages. Most were angry. Some were from board members demanding an emergency meeting. A few were threats. Her husband stood in the doorway. "Tammy, it's not worth it. Just resign." She didn't answer. She was staring at a headline that made her throat tighten. HOA president under investigation after a legal arrest attempt. Her phone buzzed again, a voicemail from an unknown number. She pressed play. Derrick's voice came through, steady and professional. "Tamara, I'm giving you a chance to make this right. Step down. Apologize to your neighbors. Otherwise, this doesn't end with social media. It ends in court." Her hands clenched around the phone. For the first time, she realized she wasn't the one in control anymore. Meanwhile, on Oak Ridge Court, porch lights flicked on one by one. Families talked quietly. Some replayed the footage. Others simply watched Derrick sitting on his porch, the man who had stood up when no one else dared. A neighbor called out, "Hey, Derrick, whole town's talking about you, man." Derrick laughed lightly. "That's so. Yeah, you're a hero." He smiled faintly, eyes drifting to the stars above. "Nah, just tired of bullies with clipboards." The camera panned closer as he looked toward the viewer. If you've ever dealt with a power-tripping HOA, you know exactly how this feels. Drop a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every single one. He leaned back, the faint sound of crickets in the background. And hit that subscribe if you want to see how this story really ends, because it's just getting started. Morning light spilled across Oak Ridge Court the next day like nothing had happened. The lawn still glistened. Birds still sang. But something had changed. The illusion of control was gone. The neighborhood chat threads were flooded. Memes, screenshots, local news links. One headline read, "HOA gone rogue. Viral video sparks federal probe." The clip had been viewed over 2.7 million times in less than 24 hours. Derrick's calm composure had become a symbol, the quiet man who stood against arrogance. Derrick stood at his kitchen counter, brewing coffee. His phone buzzed relentlessly, the same notification tone over and over, messages, calls, interview requests. He ignored most of them. He'd spent half his life in investigations. He knew the storm always comes after the calm, and the HOA wasn't going to take this lying down. Outside, a car door slammed. Derrick glanced through the blinds. A group of people was walking toward his house. Neighbors, a few familiar faces, a few who used to pretend not to see him at all. He stepped outside. At the front was Mrs. Alvarez, a retired teacher with sharp mind and a soft voice. Behind her stood Tom Griggs, Tyler's father, and three others, all residents who'd lived there for years. Mrs. Alvarez smiled nervously. "Derrick, we just want to say thank you for standing up. You said what all of us want to say for a long time." Derrick leaned on the porch rail, coffee in hand. "You don't have to thank me. You just have to stop being afraid of them." Tom crossed his arms. "HOA's meeting tonight. Emergency session. They're talking about removing Tamara." "Good," Derrick said simply. "But," Tom hesitated, "they also want to review your behavior. Some of them are saying you escalated the situation." Derrick's jaw tightened. "Let them. I've got the whole thing on record. So does half the internet. Mrs. Alvarez nodded. We'll be there too. They can't bully us anymore. Derrick smiled faintly, grateful. Then let's make sure they don't. That evening, the Lexington Pines Community Hall buzzed with tension. Folding chairs filled the room. The long wooden table at the front was lined with 7 board members, most visibly nervous. Tamara sat near the center, pale and hollow-eyed, her once confident posture replaced with stiffness. A microphone in front of her trembled with every nervous breath she took. The air smelled of cheap coffee and sweat. Derrick entered quietly and took a seat near the back. The room fell into murmurs as people recognized him. Phones came out again. One board member, Greg Landers, the HOA vice president, cleared his throat. We're here tonight to address recent events concerning President Gilbert's actions and reputation of the HOA. He paused, glancing toward Tamara. Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that what happened was unacceptable, but we also need to hear both sides. Tamara lifted her chin slightly, voice quivering. What happened was a misunderstanding. I was under pressure. The neighborhood was falling apart, rules ignored, property values threatened. Derrick's calm voice cut through from the back. You mean people weren't afraid enough yet? Heads turned, cameras pointed. Greg hesitated, but motioned for Derrick to come forward. Derrick stood slowly, walking up the aisle, every step echoing. When he spoke, his tone was even, not angry, not loud, just clear. Let me remind everyone here. You don't preserve a community by threatening it. You don't build respect by hiring imposters in fake vests. You build it with fairness, trust, and accountability. He turned toward Tamara. You cross a line. You weaponize authority that wasn't yours. Her lips trembled. You embarrass me in front of everyone. You embarrass yourself, Derrick said gently. I just showed the world what was already there. The crowd murmured approval. Even a few board members nodded subtly. Tamara gripped the edge of the table. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a man with a badge and a camera on his side. Derrick didn't respond immediately. Then he said quietly, No, I'm just a man who's tired of seeing good people scared of bad leadership. The room fell silent. Greg cleared his throat again. Given recent events, the board is voting on an immediate removal of Tamara Gilbert as HOA president, effective today. Hands went up, 6 out of 7. Tamara's eyes filled with tears. You can't do this. I built this place. I kept it safe. Safe? Mrs. Alvarez's voice came from the crowd. You call that safe? The applause started small, then grew until the room thundered. Tamara stood, trembling. This isn't over, she hissed, eyes locked on Derrick. You'll regret this. Derrick simply turned toward her. I don't regret standing up for what's right. Never have. Never will. Later that night, Derrick sat in his living room. The news played softly on TV. Former HOA president under investigation for impersonation scandal. The anchor's voice faded under the hum of the ceiling fan. He stared at the screen, but his mind was elsewhere, on the faces of neighbors finally unafraid, on the quiet dignity of truth winning. Even for a moment, his phone buzzed again. A new message. Derrick, this is Tyler. My dad says thank you. We're proud to live here again. He smiled faintly. Type back. Tell your dad the neighborhood belongs to all of you, not just the board. He put the phone down and stepped outside. The night was cool, peaceful again. A few porch lights flickered across the street. He took a breath, then spoke almost himself, but loud enough for the camera. You ever notice how some people think rules make them powerful? They forget rules are supposed to protect, not control. He looked straight ahead, his voice steady but warm. If you've ever dealt with someone like that, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I want to hear your story. He smiled faintly. And yeah, hit that subscribe, because what happens next might just change everything. 2 weeks passed. The HOA headquarters, once Tamara's fortress, was now filled with investigators. Folders stacked, laptops open, papers rustling. The board had filed official complaints against her and initiated a full audit. Derrick had been interviewed 3 times already. Calm, factual, unemotional. But privately, he felt the weight of it all. The hate mail, the phone calls, the threats buried in anonymous messages. He'd seen corruption before, just not this close to home. One afternoon, a federal envelope arrived at his door. Inside was a letter confirming that a joint investigation had been opened into HOA misconduct across the county, triggered by his viral case. He sat down slowly, reading it twice. For the first time in months, he felt something close to peace. He glanced toward the oak tree outside, the same one that had shaded the entire confrontation. He whispered, "Guess we really did make a difference." Then, with a small smirk, "Hope Tamara's watching." Across town, Tamara sat in a sterile office, facing her lawyer. He rubbed his temples. "They're recommending charges, Tamara. Fraud, misuse of HOA funds, potential conspiracy. You should consider a deal." Her voice cracked. It was supposed to be community service. "It became abuse of power," he said bluntly. "You went too far." She looked down, tears pooling in her eyes. "I just wanted respect." "You wanted control," the lawyer corrected quietly. "And you lost both." The hum of the fluorescent light filled the silence. Back on Oak Ridge Court, a breeze moved through the trees. The street looked the same, but the energy was different now. Neighbors waved more, talked more. The fear was gone. Mrs. Alvarez knocked on Derrick's door one evening. "We're forming a new board. Fair, transparent. We need someone who actually cares about the people here." Derrick raised an eyebrow. "You're asking me?" She smiled warmly. "We're asking the man who reminded us what leadership looks like." He hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but we do it differently this time. No fear, no fines, just community." Weeks later, Derrick stood before a crowd in the same hall where the chaos had started. But this time, it was laughter, not shouting. Children played near the back. Neighbors sat shoulder to shoulder. Derrick took the mic and spoke simply. "This isn't about me. This is about all of us. What happened here wasn't a fluke. It was a wake-up call. Communities don't thrive under fear. They thrive under trust." He paused, smiling as phones went up to record again. "So if you're watching this online, drop a comment and tell me, have you ever seen power abuse where you live? I want to know, because the more we talk, the less silence wins." The room erupted in applause. Derrick looked out at the faces, families, workers, retirees, kids, and thought, this is what was always supposed to be. The courthouse was quiet that morning, unnervingly so. Outside, the sky hung low and gray, as if even the weather wanted to see how this would end. Derrick walked up the courthouse steps, dressed simply, charcoal suit, no tie, badge clipped discreetly inside his jacket. He wasn't here as an agent today. He was here as a witness. The doors creaked open behind him. Mrs. Alvarez, Tom Griggs, and half the neighborhood followed. The same people who once were behind curtains now filled the benches of justice. Inside, cameras waited. The story had gone national. HOA scandal exposes abuse of power. Tamara sat at the defense table, hands folded tight, face pale. Her lawyer whispered, but she barely listened. Her eyes darted toward the door as Derrick entered, then quickly away. The judge, an older woman with a voice that cut through pretense, began, "This hearing concerns allegations of fraud, harassment, and impersonation of law enforcement within the Lexington Pines Homeowners Association." A rustle moved through the courtroom. The prosecutor rose. "We intend to show that Ms. Gilbert abused her authority, falsified enforcement actions, and used intimidation to silence residents, culminating in the unlawful detention attempt of one Derrick Hayes." Derrick remained still, hands clasped. Tamara's lawyer stood next. "Your Honor, my client admits to poor judgment, but there was no malicious intent. She believed she was protecting the integrity of her community." The judge raised an eyebrow. "By impersonating law enforcement?" Silence. When Derrick was called to the stand, the room shifted. Every camera light turned to him. He spoke calmly, just as he had that day on the lawn. "I didn't confront her to humiliate anyone. I confronted her because what she was doing was wrong and dangerous. There's a line between leadership and control. She crossed it." The prosecutor asked, "Why didn't you arrest her yourself?" Derrick smiled faintly. "Because justice is a revenge. It's restraint. You let the truth do the heavy lifting." The courtroom murmured softly, like even the walls were nodding. The prosecutor continued, "Mr. Hayes, in your experience, have you seen abuse of power like this before?" Derrick hesitated, then answered quietly, "Yes. And it always starts small, a rule bent here, a threat there. It only grows because good people stay silent." He looked toward the gallery, directly into the cameras. "If you're watching this, and you've ever felt powerless against someone hiding behind authority, speak up. Don't wait. Don't let fear win." The judge gave a small nod. Even she seemed moved. After 2 days of testimony, evidence, and witness accounts, the verdict was inevitable. The judge read the statement slowly, deliberately. "Tamara Gilbert, you are found guilty of fraud and misuse of HOA authority. You will serve 1 year of probation, community service, and restitution for damages." Tamara's head dropped. The courtroom was silent, not triumphant, just heavy. The kind of silence that follows truth. When the judge dismissed everyone, Derrick remained seated for a moment, watching her being led away. He felt not victory, but closure. Mrs. Alvarez touched his shoulder. "You did it, Derrick." "No," he said softly. "We did. I just stood where someone needed to." Weeks later, Oak Ridge Court felt different. No more anonymous fines taped to doors. No more fear of walking outside. Kids rode bikes again. Neighbors shared barbecues. The new board, transparent and fair, released a public statement. Community before control. Derrick smiled when he read it. That night, the sun dipped low, washing the street in gold. He stood under the oak tree where it all began.